Oh, my goodness. If you know me, you know I'm super professional with my setup. So I'm about to take my phone to my computer, which is balanced on God knows what, to make this work, y'all. And it's called an illusion. It's called an illusion of professionalism. Okay, we work with what we have. So my so my phone is taped to my computer, and we are almost ready. I'm waiting for my good new friend, Rev Karla, to join us. We've been laughing and texting each other, and she's just such a delight. And I just can't wait. I cannot wait for this conversation. And Numa Soul is here. Speaking of Rev Karla. Y'all, happy Sunday. I hope you're enjoying your day, whatever you choose to do on Sunday. I'm going to see if this is her. Give me 1 second. No, I don't think that's her. But she just texted me. Hi. I don't know. Numasol, I assume that's you, Rev Karla. And I see that you just texted me. I'm afraid if I were to go to my text, though, will I... Hold on, y'all. I'll be right back. She said, just checking, are we live yet? Oh, shoot. I don't know if Numasol is her, but yes. So let me go text her. I'll be right back. Okay. I just texted her. Yes. Hopefully she's on her way. It's a little confusing because Instagram and TikTok have different methods of joining your lives. It's not her. Thank you. Thanks. Hold on. Oh, Carla, you crack me up. There she is. You know why I'm laughing at you.
It took a lot to get me here, right?
You're so pretty. But so am I. So it's
Yes, you
okay.
are. You're adorable. You're adorable. And you
Oh,
can hear me okay?
I can hear
Good?
you.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
you can hear me?
Great. Yes, I can. Hello, you
Hi.
beautiful soul.
You beautiful soul. Carla and I have been in, and I've asked you this offline, but is it okay if I call you Carla
Yes,
on live? Great.
absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
Carla and I was teasing her because she thought I was someone else, and then I wasn't sure. I thought that was like her nickname for me. I'm like, I don't know, but I like you, so I'm just going to say whatever I need to say to make you feel good about yourself.
Oh, I really have to clean up my contact list.
It's okay. It's okay. We're messy and we're human, and I love it.
Yeah.
Can I?
Actually that go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, because I'm trying to, if you don't know, Rev Karla calls everyone beautiful soul. And so I was thinking about what that means to me. Like, what is a beautiful soul? And I was thinking this human connection and laughing with one another and being messy and having fun and being vulnerable and being seen in our messiness as we are. But I'm curious, because I know you're intentional with your words. I'm putting you on the spot. When you call someone a beautiful soul, what does that mean to you?
I think the reason it just came to me, I was looking for language that wasn't attached to my religious heritage
Mm,
as much. And I wanted something that transcended the religious boundaries
mm,
and really honed in on what I believe we all are. And so it takes us away from the dogma of religion
mm-hmm.
and recognizes almost this namaste. I see in you what is also in me, and if we recognize that and we meet each other there, that can help us hopefully have a paradigm shift about how we're going to communicate, how we respect each other, and our right to be here fully human and walk
Mm,
authentically in our humanity, but also as we showed up, as we were created to be here. So
it's
I think that's
beautiful.
really really the reason why I started using it to be like a, this is how I'm going to start my conversation with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that goes two-way. I mean, it's definitely beautiful to see. And it immediately, for me personally, I help to like let the guards down with we can get into what trauma means for both of us, but I'm sure it's probably a reminder for you too, to like, no matter what comes of this, remind me, universe, source, God, whatever you want to call it, that we are both souls together and we're in this together.
Ooh, I love that. And actually, that was just the little meditative practice I did right before we went live,
Yeah.
was to be a reminder that I want to be a vessel. And so
Mm.
what's showing forth is not so much my agenda or my experiences as much as it is that we're working for the greater good of all of us. So whatever I have to say, get me out of the way and allow what needs to arrive to arrive.
I want to share with you what your practice looked like. Can you tell me tangibly what you did to kind of put yourself in that mindset?
I usually start with just a short breathing exercise. And I would say the closest thing that I come to a spiritual practice would be like a visualization. But
Sure.
then I do like because when I lost, that's not the right word, when I released my religious heritage, and I
Mm,
think sometimes I do want to hold that space for a minute, because I think sometimes when you are releasing whatever it is that no longer serves your highest good, there is a sense of loss that comes with it. So that word needed to be here for the moment, because I have been dealing with a lot of relationship loss that's around that. For a while, my entire contact list was nothing but my church. My entire text string was nothing but my church and the church activity. That's who I was. I
yeah.
was very much, I dove into that work. So I just want to honor that for a minute. Usually that first word that arrives is what needs to arrive. But when I
Mm,
released that, and I wanted to really honor the journey I'm on. I'm an ordained interfaith, interspiritual minister. And interfaith means that we honor the divine wisdom and the sacredness that has shown up in all of world religions throughout time.
mm,
Interspiritual says that spirituality and the connection to the divine can and does exist outside of the construct of religion. So that, as my ordination, means that I want to honor the work that I did to deconstruct from my religious heritage and say, all right, what's showing up for me now?
mm,
What is asking for me? So my practices can be very fluid. Sometimes it's altar work, sometimes it's meditative prayer. It will look like prayer. I do a lot of coverings, which does take me back to my religious heritage. When someone's getting ready to leave for a journey, I actually visualize covers over them, like just like I want you covered, I want you protected, that
yeah.
kind of thing. So for this, it was really more like I said, get me out of the way and expand beyond the mysteries that I don't think humans were ever supposed to understand. I don't think
Mm,
humans were ever supposed to completely grasp what the mysteries of the divine are. We try to come close inside our practices and our experiences and inside our religion, how religion defines it. But when it becomes very dogmatic, then we start to lose our way. So that was a
mm.
really long answer to your question.
It's just like, I'm not surprised and I love it. I know we're
Ah,
all just like, and this is recorded, so I'll post this later for when we want to
great,
listen to it again.
great.
What I love that you said is that you did catch yourself, but what I heard, I'll tell you what I gathered from that is it's a grieving process. I think that change is a form of death and rebirth. As someone identifies as Christian, I resonate with the resurrection from the point of view of how do we resurrect? What inside
Mm,
of us must die in order for us to be reborn into the person that God intends for us to be? And it could be a daily practice. It could be, you know what, tomorrow, Monday, I'm going to decide to get up 15 minutes earlier and just sit in presence with my coffee and feel the warmth of the coffee cup on my hands. And that is my moment with God. And yet in doing so, is it easy to wake up 15 minutes early on a Monday morning? Heck no. So you're kind of putting to death this old practice. And there's always the stages, I feel, of grief, because it's not easy. Because
hmm
people want change, but we don't want change because
Yeah.
change is uncomfortable. So that's what I gathered from that. It sounds to me like you're constantly, you know, looking to see curiously where your ego is in relationship to you being a vessel for this higher power.
Well,
I
yeah,
think it's
yes.
beautiful.
Thank you. And I always say too that some of the hardest work that I've done on my spiritual journey has been when I started the deconstruction, decolonizing process,
Yeah.
because I always said that if I had known how hard seminary was going to be from just an emotional perspective, not so much like, I knew I was I was working to become an ordained interfaith, interspiritual minister, which there's wisdom around that. But the letting go of what no longer serves your highest good is more than just leaving church. It's deep soul work. And
Yeah.
I always said that if you knew how hard that was, a lot of people wouldn't end up going. And some people don't.
Yeah.
They walked away from it. And there were times where I didn't want to do the work
Yeah.
because it was about looking at our physical, our life experiences and how they could be hindering our spirituality.
Mm.
And but then how is this dance of life here to help us on our spiritual journey? If we understand that we're connected to that which we will someday return, and that's as close as I get to defining. I believe that we came from love, will return to love, and that's a long way from a former Southern Baptist to be able to
Mm.
look at your spirituality and be okay with that is as close to defining whatever it is and being at peace with that. Um,
Yeah.
but that's as close as I'll get to it. But yeah, it's deep, hard soul work. So I always cringe when people will say, "Oh yeah, you're just cherry picking different religions, and you just don't want to do the hard work." Well, let me tell you, I have been an ordained elder. I've been through several denominations in my life. I navigated Southern Baptist, Presbyterian, non-denominational. I ended up in Pentecostal. Church was my last church before I finally left. Um, don't tell me I haven't done the work. I have done the
Listen.
work. I
Yeah.
have done the Bible studies. I've taught the Bible studies. I've hosted women's prayer circles. I've done it all, and
Mm.
nothing I did there can compare to what I did when I realized how much I'm not saying it's all, but especially with my experience inside church,
Mm.
it was
Yeah.
related to the physical. It was related to control. It was related to how we're going to keep people in obedience and
Hmm.
submissive to this institution so it can continually be financed and perpetuate that institution for
Mm.
the good of the institution, not necessarily for the good of the human
Mm.
and that life experience. So yeah, yeah,
You know,
I've got the
there's
receipts.
it's so funny. Anytime you said, "Oh, you're just cherry picking," anytime I read a comment that says the word "just" near the beginning, I'm like, I don't really need to see the rest of it because clearly you
Yeah,
just put me in a box based on a 45-second video without having done the work. What you're doing is you're taking your own pain. It's too uncomfortable for you, so you're purging it onto me, and I'm not going to
yeah,
take it. I'll have a
yeah,
conversation with you. I'll sit at the table with you if you don't understand and you want to ask some curious questions. But if your intention is to get me to be in a box to avoid accountability so you don't have to do the work and you can feel more comfortable, I don't have time for that. Woo!
good for you preaching.
I
Somebody's
gotta take it.
preaching.
It's Sunday. There's
Yes.
so many questions. I'm so excited.
Okay.
And so I want to rewind a little bit. You
Sure.
know, can we talk a little bit about your upbringing and like, I think when I think of deconstruction, I think of a lot of, unlearning and asking like, does this serve me? But that first takes the building blocks of these limiting beliefs that potentially have held you back that you needed to deconstruct. So I'd love to
Hmm.
go back to the source. Can you talk briefly about your relationship with religion growing up and what that was like for you?
Absolutely. And I will just say that for me, I had never even heard the term deconstruction until I came to TikTok. I always said that I was just
Yeah.
detangling from the things that no longer serve my highest good, and I just called
Yeah.
it the great untangling or detangling,
Mm,
whatever I wanted to choose at the time,
sure.
because it was less about unlearning and more about releasing
Mm,
and healing from some of the trauma that I had experienced. But I always start my story with saying that ever since I was a little girl, I loved Jesus. I was in love with Jesus. My grandmother was a staunch Southern Baptist. And because we spent so much time with her in the beautiful hills of Kentucky, I was in church in Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, every revival. Here you've got this little 6-year-old to 9-year-old girl. I went to revival every night. I didn't miss. I was fascinated. I should have, looking back now, because I would watch these preachers and be mesmerized. And I would go home and try to figure out the concept of what they were talking about. Sometimes it would keep me up for hours because I wasn't comfortable enough to explore my curiosity by asking questions of the adults. So I kept all that internal. But that led me to, I didn't want to be in the child's Bible studies. I wanted to be in the adults because I didn't want the felt, the felt Jacob and Esau going across. I didn't want any of that. I wanted to really hear the beef, if you will, of what was happening with religion. So this happened really early for me.
Wow.
And the conflict, you're immersed before you really understand the limiting belief. So I think that's the work of the patriarchal indoctrination that often leads to internalized misogyny, because even though my grandmother and the other adults in my life may have been telling me that I could be anything I wanted in my life. You're just you're a special girl, Karla. You can be whatever you want in your life. But yet I'm in a religion that did not believe that. I'm in a religion that believed that the male was the authority. A woman shall submit to that. If you watch my comments, every once in a while, somebody will come in and say, under whose male authority are you preaching, young lady? Which they still do, because in their mind, and I'll go check the profile and I'll say, okay, so this is a woman and she's being sincere. She is truly immersed so into that indoctrination that she believes that I am acting out of a woman's right to be able to preach outside a man's authority. So that conflict didn't happen for several years as I navigated. And then in high school, I was baptized in the Southern Baptist Church. I was rebaptized in a non-denominational Christian church because they would not accept my Southern Baptist baptism. And I remember, and I was about 16 when that happened. I went, wait a minute, what? I remember that. I always go back and say there were stepping stones all along the way.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Where I was deconstructing before I actually ever recognized it. And I don't know how many
pause. If I may really interrupt, as I say, right? Like, I think it's important for us to remind people that are listening that this is a journey, right? So if this is, I'm going to go so far back as if this is the first time you've ever heard the word deconstruction, or if you are one of those people sitting down, listening with an open mind, being like, this makes me uncomfortable because I'm not used to hearing women talk like this. There's space for you if you open your mind and listen, but I want to recognize that, like, it doesn't happen overnight. So as you're listening, I want you to pick up these breadcrumbs that Karla is leaving us of, like, this was this one moment of like, wait, that doesn't feel right. And Karla, what it kind of reminds me of is a relationship that I ended a couple of years ago with someone who had severe narcissistic tendencies. I was very much in love with this person. I also thought that that's the love I deserved, right? So it's the love I accepted. And when we broke up and I started seeing what was going on behind the veil, I was able to see all these red flags pop up. And I'm curious, and I do want to go back to your story, but does that resonate with you?
Oh,
like, you
absolutely.
have to kind of like have a breaking point, and then you go, wait a second. And that's what I mean about death, because then you experience the stages of death. If you're experiencing anger on your journey, that's okay. If you're sad because what you've been taught might not be right, that's okay. If you're afraid, that's okay. What it's not okay is for you to beat yourself up and compare yourself to Karla right now, because not everyone is as eloquent or spends as much time as Karla and I do thinking about these things. So the last thing I want you to do is think, I'm going to shut this off because that's not me. I'll never be like that. So please just continue to listen and just ask yourself curious questions. And if you would like to drop comments, you may do so as well. Thank you.
I think that was an important interruption, because you know your audience much better than I do. And in my space, I talk about this stuff all the time. They've heard elements, parts of my deconstructing story. I talk a lot about the harm that the threat of what's happening right now inside politics. I'm very concerned about that. And so, I'm very vocal about what my story was, and not so much now how it's impacted me, but where I'm going because of that journey. But that still
Amen.
that took a long time to get there.
And here we
So,
are at 16 questioning, wait a second.
mm-hmm.
And if I may, as we kind of dive back in there, could you also take a moment to, as you're telling your story, tell us what you were feeling at that time? Like if fear came up or anything, any feelings that you felt so we can relate. I would love to hear that.
I think it was the first time I felt, well, in my personal life. Well, there's not that I want to go down a row of too much of detail about my personal life, but there is a connection to people who are indoctrinated into these types of religious beliefs, that abuse or trauma that you have experienced in your life makes you more susceptible to adherence to those ideologies. And I had that in my life. But so I was already used to swallowing my words and becoming just my needs were not important, because I had already had some familial indoctrination and some harmful experiences that taught me that as a child I don't have a voice. And so then moving into that, where, well, I have these three white men telling me that if I want to work in vacation Bible school, and I've been called to the office of the church, this is a big deal right out of high school, right after I just got done with track. And the only way I can work in vacation Bible school is to get rebaptized. It's a big deal, even though it wasn't until like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I'd done something wrong. Later that night, you're going, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that experience? What's the difference? So then I started to realize the difference in churches, even though there's this underlying current where they really don't get along, but on the surface, they try. And so then I started to understand denominational differences. And then from there, just navigated many different churches until I ended up as an ordained Presbyterian, proud of that work. And then, like I said, the Pentecostal, but by that time, I felt a longing that whatever my religious heritage was not feeding this desire. As much as I loved my heritage and I loved my grandmother, I loved this navigating. It wasn't church shopping, because I dove in, I did the work, but I could feel the call to be like someplace else. There was something else, someplace else I was needing to go. And what I realized after the last church was that I was always trying to make the church be something that it was never going to be for me. It just never was going to be expansive enough to hold where my spirituality was taking me. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't moments that were enriching for me, but I also think when you look at those breadcrumbs, there were so many times where I would have conversations about the acceptance of LGBTQIA plus humans in our congregation, to be told they're welcome as much as they want. That's when I first realized, because I thought, oh, welcome. That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome, because I just came from a church that was getting ready to split because of the LGBTQIA plus community. They didn't want to ordain. They didn't want to marry. They didn't want to do any of that. So then I hear, welcome. Say that again? My Siri thought there was something I was saying.
That's funny.
So then I go to this church and I hear, oh yeah, of course they can come. And then it's another level of my indoctrination when I realize how misleading, how harmful welcoming versus affirming. And we have a whole resource guide that we're going to release very soon that talks about the difference between a welcoming and affirming church, and why it's important that you do your research before you go in. If that's important to you, that you do your research, and it's more than just saying we welcome everyone and putting a banner out front. So
Yeah.
obviously, I'm a huge advocate, and I want to. If people are wanting to be church, then we need to make sure we're asking the right questions and looking for the right answers when you ask them, not just getting placated, which happens a lot.
Yeah. You bring up something really fascinating. I love talking to spiritual leaders who identify as ally and who actually act like allies, right? And which isn't to be, disrespectful to our allies, but saying you're an ally doesn't make you an ally. And you go so above and beyond. And the reason I think it's so important is because you don't have to. It's not, your life is not on the line when it comes to my existence, whether or not I can get married, whether or not there are still 30 some states where you can get fired for being gay, whether or not gay panic to excuse the murder of gay people is still allowed. You say, no, this is not right. You don't have to do that. I'm glad that you do that. And I think it's such important work. Can you talk to me a little bit about your relationship with the queer community and what that journey was like for you? Like, did you always feel you were affirming without knowing what that word was? Or did you have to sort of unpack your own beliefs as well, like I did?
Oh, no, I think I was pretty well. I just wrote about this in my blog about the white privilege and intersecting with my religious heritage,
Yeah.
and how I was not aware. I grew up in the 60s. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
60s baby, okay? So
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at a time where you have some of the highest chaos and tension around civil unrest
Yeah.
outside of the Civil War. I was oblivious to that. I was 7 years old when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated,
Mm.
but that had no impact on my life.
No.
And because there was a huge separation, a chasm between what's happening out there and what's happening over here.
Yeah.
And I believe that's part of that indoctrination, that patriarchy, that makes
Yeah.
sure that you don't feel that you are responsible for anything that's going on over there. And the same with being supportive of the LGBTQIA plus community.
Mm.
In high school, there might have been conversations about it, but I remember specifically my English teacher saying that we don't need to discuss that because there's never been one of those here. Now,
Oh,
I
wow.
grew up in that was a high school in southern Indiana, and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess I don't know any. It wasn't until I moved to my first mid city where I had met someone who was openly gay that I realized I became confronted with the teachings of my religious heritage, and I'm looking straight on to somebody who was the kindest person that I wanted to be in community with, and
Yeah.
I was conflicted. I
Yeah.
was really conflicted because I didn't understand how that person could be the same person that I had been taught that was a sin, was going to
Mm.
hell, was an abomination to God. All those things that I had been hearing that I thought was out there, so it doesn't really apply to me. And then here is this person, this beautiful soul, and who just I remember saying some really stupid things, and he'd take my hands and he'd say, "Oh, honey, do you realize what that was there?" And no, tell me. And I'm just remembering these memories
Yeah, I
about
love
how
it.
patient he was with me, and we became such dear friends. And
Mm.
that was really when again, another level, another breadcrumb back there of the deconstructing, and what that was definitely when I became aware how it was intersecting with my religion, and that was when it was starting to be the tension started to grow inside some of the churches that I was connected with, where they were going to split over this decision. That's still happening today here in 2022. I
I
believe
mean, Methodist,
the
yeah.
Methodists and the Lutherans. I think the
Mm-hmm.
Lutherans will vote this summer to schism.
Mm.
And so it's a big deal still for people who are considered some of the more progressive denominations.
Yeah.
So, but that, yeah. So, and I want to say something that to what you just said. I don't have to, but I do have to.
Mm. Thank you.
I must.
Mm.
it's because, I'm 60. I could be crocheting and just going to I have 8 grandchildren. But this is the legacy. This is not only part of my legacy, it's the way I want my grandchildren to see the work that I did. Not just talk about it, but do the work, because that's how we make things happen. That's how we impact change.
You're
And
gonna make me
so
cry, Rev Karla. I love you so much.
it's, and I've seen the harm, and I love you too. And I've seen the harm too many times. And I can think about the times where I was quiet and I was silent, when I did when I allowed that patriarchal indoctrination to silence my voice and be like, well, I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want to be the one, I don't want their anger to come towards me. And to finally do that deep soul work, to release that, and be able to use that place of privilege that I know I have for the good of the whole. That's what I'm here for. That's what I think all of us are here for.
So, and this is shown in your work, right? Because so far we've sort of heard, your journey inside the brick and mortar of a church building. Can we talk about that transition in your life when you decided to kind of maybe shift your trajectory a little bit?
From church to...
Yes.
Yeah. I'd have to say that when the last time that I left church, I knew there was enough happening. I wouldn't say I had a plan. I just knew there was going to be something that would happen that would be so unconscionable and egregious that it would be the last thing that would happen. And it was. An entire sermon was written about me, and I had 2 or 3 people come up afterwards to say, I think he didn't use your name, but I think he was talking to you about you. And I went, yeah, I know. It was all about obedience and stuff. And I walked out of those church doors and I thought, I didn't think I would not return. I just thought I was going to go look for a different version of what I knew. And I tried several different churches. I'm just so glad that I was already doing some of that work, because I could have stifled this desire to experience the divine outside my religious heritage, because I did find some churches that would have worked.
Yeah.
But that would have limited what I was being called to do and who I was being called to be. And that took me on a deep dive into some very intense books that took me far, far and away from my beliefs. And you and I have never talked about how our beliefs align, because I don't talk a lot about beliefs. I don't think that's as important. That's where we get into the dogma that separates us. That's part of the power control that religious institutions use to ensure they're going to continue their perpetuation. I mean, somebody's got to keep the lights on, right? But
so let's give them something to talk about. Let's give them something to fight about over here, right?
Exactly.
While we move money around here, and they're not looking over here because they're fighting about whether the word gay was in the Bible before 1946.
Thanks. There you go.
Right.
And so for me, I went on a huge learning journey that took me through world religions, but also took me through alternative understandings of the scripture that I had grown up with. And I remember the day, I don't say this to offend anyone, but it's my experience. So this is the best way that I can describe it. I was sitting on the couch reading a book by Bishop John Shelby Spong. And it's like I intuitively knew this. And I lost my Santa Claus. That time when you're a little child and you hope I don't disappoint anybody out there. And you realize you can't unknow that. You can't unknow that anymore. You are now in a new world of reality that shakes you. At least it did me.
Yeah.
And it was the same
great
for
analogy.
me. I literally fell on the floor and cried my eyes out because
Mhm.
that's how it tied I was. But it was the one element that I really needed to release
Yeah.
so that I would be ready for what was to come.
Mm.
Because then in my 50s, I'm in college and then I'm off to seminary because that's what needed to come. And I had to move past, turn completely away from that to be able to open up for a new understanding that invited other wisdom traditions, that
Yes.
invited not only a new understanding but different divine experiences that
And I
that
just want to,
show.
I'm so sorry.
No, please go.
Well, I just want to say, I want to pause and note, like, this is so important. As Brene Brown says, when we numb the pain, we numb the joy. So I firmly believe that if Carla did not allow herself to experience the, I'm going to use my words, fear or pain or just being at a loss and sobbing and releasing, if she didn't allow herself to feel that, I don't know if she'd be doing the work. Well, what do you think? If you didn't allow yourself to experience that fear and those emotions, what would have happened to your work, do you think? How would that have changed you?
Uh, it would have been the same as if I had stayed in that church that I had found.
Yeah.
I was going back into old patterns, and that's the safe thing to do.
Does the word confined resonate with you? Because that's what
Oh,
I'm hearing.
completely.
Yeah.
Completely. I felt so bound up, but I understand why people say stay. I get it.
Yeah.
It can be really lonely out here in the spiritual wilderness.
Yeah.
And the loss of community is enough is the primary reason that people
Hmm.
stay and fake it in the pews.
Yeah. And I also want to say
Because
that you don't need to leave. Carla is not saying you
no,
must
no, no,
leave the
no, no, no,
church.
no, 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 no,
But I
no.
think but I think what I'm hearing you say is, regardless of if you stay or if you leave, I do believe that the deconstruction process is a lonely experience
It
because you're
is.
still figuring it out. I mean, to me, it's taking this image of Christ on the cross and removing it, which is painful, and seeing if that, I say Christ, you might say love, is inside of you. And it's a personal relationship, and that absolutely can be a lonely experience.
It should be. It should be.
Ooh, tell me about that.
Because we are all, I shouldn't say all, but many of us who grew up in a religious heritage that had a very rigid dogma or even just a belief system, some kind of
Yeah,
ideology that provided you the answers and your
yeah.
beacon for what you were to believe.
Hmm.
We are conditioned to look towards that tradition for any kind of spiritual wobbliness that we might be feeling.
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer isn't found there.
Mm.
And I would also say that when someone tells me they don't know what to believe after they've believed something a certain way and it's got them wobbly, I'm almost dancing for joy. Like,
Yeah,
because
yes.
I can go through the other side of this and say, oh, this is going to get exciting, but first it may be a little
Yeah.
lonely and you're going to
Yeah.
feel these things, but just trust the journey. But what I would say to
Mm.
what you said about not leaving church, that is absolutely true. But I would hope that people
Hmm.
who are feeling this desire to know something outside of what they've been taught, that your church encourages that your church
Yeah, thank you.
encourages you to expand beyond your heritage so that you become back you can come back and serve in that capacity or serve as a more grounded, peaceful
Mm.
member of that community that is not held by obligation or by
Yeah,
tradition of your family, or you don't know what you're going to do without it, that they encourage you because you come back as a better version of yourself.
beautiful.
And so that would be the only thing I would say about that. But
It's a great
uh
distinction. Thank you for that.
oh and I think it's so easy. I mean, I've been on this deconstructing journey now for 11 years. So
Mm.
this is who I am. And I also will say that it wasn't the end goal was not to leave church forever. That was
Mm.
not my goal in leaving. And even when I was in college, it wasn't my goal. I don't even sure it was when I was in seminary. until one day I realized that you can have what you need between you and what's holy without the confine of the church
Yeah.
or that kind of community, that you can find sacredness and connection outside of the traditional ways that you had found them. So that works for me. That's not a judgment on anybody else, other than if you're faking it in the pews, do something about it.
I love that. And so to me, what I'm hearing is a couple of things. Thing one, to me, you're defining what faith is, right? I think that there's this, and I've said this before, but there's a misconception that faith is certainty. And I think we learn that in the pews a lot, right? Don't question, because then you don't have faith for God. I don't think that's true. I think the opposite is true. I would say that faith is sitting in the unknown, allowing yourself to be uncomfortable and say, I don't know, but I'm going to sit here anyway. And I think that the deconstruction process for me is taking a flashlight that can only see a couple steps in front of you. So you turn the flashlight on when you ask a question. You say, great, you 11 years ago did not know that you were going to leave the church. You didn't need to see where the trees ended. All you needed to do was turn that flashlight on and see your feet and take one step. And after you take one step, maybe there's a creek in front of you. Oh, okay, well, I'm going to turn around. But if you didn't take the step, you wouldn't have known. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't feel you have to have the end. Give yourself permission to ask the questions that come when they come, because it's possible they're coming when they need to. And I will also say, there's not a coincidence, because you and I are like this. You started deconstructing 11 years ago. I came out 11 years ago. So I feel like I just think that's amazing to think that when you were asking some of the same questions, I was asking the questions about my own self. And I think that's beautiful.
Oh, I love that. I knew there was more than just one of those connections from TikTok. There is so much more here. Something that you said I would love to expand on too is the one thing that I have noticed about deconstruction is it has invited me out of my comfort zones in ways that I hadn't anticipated. And I want to give you this example and this is me being vulnerable, because I think it's important, especially for your followers. When I had left church and I was looking for a church, I found a church that was not only welcoming, it was affirming. And the head pastor and his partner were in relationship, but also leadership in the church. And I loved the church. It was a combination of, I loved everybody there. And it was not only were LGBTQI plus members community invited, they were in leadership. They were on stage. They were part of the board. You could see that it was a genuine connection. It wasn't just for show.
It's not fitting in a welcoming church. It's belonging in an affirming church. It's being seen and celebrated as you are and saying, I don't need to check this at the door. I'm coming into this space, the wholehearted person. It's beautiful.
Yes. And what I always say about the welcoming church is it is a form of passive conversion therapy, because for you to be fully accepted, you're starting to go into this with your heart wide open and you're feeling like you're going to be home. But in order to be fully accepted, you have to change the very foundation of who you are.
Yes.
And that can be nothing else but passive conversion therapy. They're hoping to get you in for that. And I know that's hard for some people to hear. But I'm in this church, and I'd been coming for about a month or so, and they announced, this was before same-sex marriage was legal. So they announced a family gathering, retreat for a 3-day weekend. They're going, and I just could not, wait a minute, how is this going to work? They're not married. I came up on another one of I did not know that was still there. And it really upset me because of the work I had done. But now looking back, I had so much more work to do, that I knew where I was wanting my spirituality to grow. But when they first announced that, I came up against this. They're going to be going to this church retreat, but they're not married. And why
Mm.
aren't they married? It's because the laws won't allow them. But I had to really come home and
Yeah.
be, and it was the first time that I really recognized I am at the edge of my comfort zone. And I can either retreat and hold on to this prejudice, or I can release it because I'm
Mm.
being invited into a new understanding about what it means to be fully in community and accepting and loving,
Yeah.
and what it means to be human and accepting
Yeah.
others in their humanity. That
Mm.
has nothing to do with what the law says about how they exist. That was a huge shift for me. And I see that all the time in my comments where I'm talking about something that is about same-sex marriage that is now could be a threat
Yeah.
that they're talking about. And if that, and people say something like, well, you know, I'm not sure that that it shouldn't be through the Christian lens that we decide that. Like, oh, really? Well, let me just make a response to your comment.
Let's
And
talk about it, as you
yeah,
say.
let's talk about it.
Famous last words before a comment gets deleted.
Yeah,
I just want to say I
exactly.
love watching your clapback videos, and then I just look clicking the comments and, oh, it's not there anymore. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you're not going to hold yourself accountable, which happens, I
Mm-mm.
think, 90% of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Exactly.
again, they're
They
just not
do.
ready. Maybe they're just not ready.
They're not, and they're not. And I, you know, if I go look at their page and I can tell that they've either duetted something of mine and they've trashed me, I'm not going to have much patience for them. I've
Hmm.
always said that we have to be really careful about who we're talking to.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to change the mind of the person who was indoctrinated like I was. I'm not trying to change their mind. I'm hoping for those, because the middle is where we all try to live. But
Yep.
that is where we need to be informed and helpful allies.
Yep.
And that is where we have the chance to do most good and to use our collective energies to elevate the human condition to the next
Mm.
level, which I believe we're being invited to do.
Yep.
So that what will change them will be something as powerful as what was changing in me in my entire life, and I didn't know it.
And
Not
it's
so
not
much.
your job.
It's not my job.
It's not your
It's not
job.
my
I tell my dad
job.
all the time, it's not my job to change you. It's not my
Yeah.
job to teach you. And then I love when I get the comments, well, this is what you do. That's disappointing. No, 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 no. I don't need to defend my existence and my essence as a human being so that you feel comfortable.
There
No,
you
you
go.
do the work.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
You are preaching good today.
Listen, I'm fired up. You fire me up.
Oh, good.
Can as we close, this is such a wonderful conversation. I'd love to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
If there's someone sitting, listening, afraid, um, potentially one of my followers just who is in the closet and who's goes to church every week, maybe twice a week, like I did, like you did, and some of this might be a little new to them, and they might just be scared, but they understand that they're different than other people. It's a very lofty question. What advice, like, I'd love for you to speak to that one person.
The first thing that comes to mind is there's still time. Beautiful soul, there is still time.
Mm.
If you do not feel safe, if you do not have the community around you, to help support you, if something about your life will be jeopardized because you come out and step fully into your authenticity, then just know there's still time. If
Mm.
anything about my story tells you there's no time lost in waiting for the place where you are ready and the life situation has allowed you to move towards that. I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes especially when I talk to people who are closeted, that they feel that there's a sense of urgency because they're also seeing people celebrate their authenticity and they're
Mm.
telling their coming out story and they're feeling that pressure. But that doesn't mean it's your time, but your
Yeah.
time will come. It
Yeah.
will come. Keep, what I always say is in as much as it's safe for you to do so, create the community that you can, whether it's online or in places where you know that your presence will be safe, that you will still be be able to stay under radar, find those spaces to affirm you. You know, come to these places like this, but also find so that you are reminded that you aren't a mistake. So that if you are in church and you're hearing these things, that you are reminded, no, there's other people, turn this way, look at us, because we don't believe scripture says those things. We don't believe that you are a mistake. We don't believe that you have to change something that's so inherently who you are to be accepted and loved by the divine. That you are here as you are, and that is what the world needs to accept, not you changing anything about yourself. So find those places that affirm that. Yeah. And you know, do commit to that soul work that I was talking about when I was deconstructing. You also have that, commit to that soul work, whether it's I'm thinking of a book, and I don't know if you've ever read this, but it's called Gay Christian 101, and it's several years old, but it is a preacher who is what I would consider a fundamentalist pastor, who, the book is incredible, but what that means is he still holds on to the infallible and inerrant word of the Bible and the teachings, but also says all of that's been twisted. Let me show you another way to see this. So there's so many approaches that will help serve your spirituality if you will just continue to be patient and know that your time is coming.
And ask questions, y'all. God can handle your questions. And if someone cannot handle your question, it says much more about them and their fear and their projection than it says about you. So ask questions, and their response or lack of a response is the data that you need before you take that next step in the forest with your flashlight.
There you go. I love that.
And as much as it feels lonely, we are here for you. I would never bring someone on my page that did not feel the same way. You are safe, you are celebrated, and you are welcome here because of who you are and not in spite of who you are. And we need you to tell your story. And you are a leader. You just don't know it yet. And that's okay, because we see it. Believe us. I have 2 more questions for you.
Sure.
I want to conclude with how we can reach you, and I'd love for you to talk about like the beautiful work you are doing. I kind of want to close there, but before that, you mentioned, you said something that made me think we don't know what we don't know, right? Because you said, I thought I had. I'm putting words in your mouth. I thought I had the answers, but I had no idea that there was still so much more to unpack, which makes me believe that oftentimes we don't know what we don't know. What are you learning now in your life, Karla, that 10 years from now you're going to say, wow, I thought I knew and I had no idea?
Wow, that's a really good question. I'm going to start with that and then come back to what I'm working on.
Please, yeah.
What I think, I'm moving farther back through the intersectionality of Christianity, and where did it take a sharp right turn? And there are places in history. So I've got the last 50 years of Americanized evangelical Christianity pretty solid, but it's taken me farther back than what I expected. And in 10 years, I think that's going to help me reconcile even further this mystery of who Jesus was. And that is the Jesus story is something that I'm still very bonded to.
Yeah.
And, I have a tattoo. I know you can't see it, but it's got a cross on it. You can see it there. This is a logo for a nonprofit, and it says the least of these on it. I've never once considered taking that tattoo off of my arm, even with the cross and my deconstructing from my religious heritage. I think that like I always talk about releasing some of that. I think I have levels of some of maybe even my ancestral heritage that holds me, that binds me to how Christianity evolved up to this point. And I want to understand it back to the beginning. And what exactly were the intentions of Jesus, this amazing person who came forth to, was it a radical advocate, was seen as so radical that he caught the attention of the Romans who crucified him. So I think that that's what I will be able to I think you'll see me less worried about those people who are still nipping at my ankles. I come from
Mm,
right. I come from rescue, so it's always called the ankle nippers. Those ones that are just around you.
mm,
That's how I feel about them, which I think is also very powerful because I don't see them doing really any harm to me. It's less about that and being able to focus solely on the person, that spiritual seeker who also wants that connection. I
yeah.
think that's what I'll be focusing on because that's certainly where my learning is right now. I just gobbling it up in so many different ways.
God, I
And
love that answer.
then, I have founded Pneuma Soul Center for Spiritual Transformation, and I
Yeah.
have an amazing team. I'm only able to be here sliding in at 3:59 to be on this call because they obviously need to get in my contact list and clean that up. But they are amazing. And
Mm,
one of my seminary sisters is my colleague, Reverend Arda, who is the
mm,
director of program and services. And I want to read something about I want to make sure to get this out. She worked with the New York City Mayor's office to protect LGBTQ youth from organized religion. And that is important because that's the caliber of people who are coming to work. And we're putting together an amazing an agenda for our workshop. So the first one
mm,
that will be launched in June is called God is Gay.
mm.
And we like disruptive language. I think disruptive and agitating is very important. It gets people's attention, but more importantly, the person, like I was talking about these people who are faking it in the pews, it's like, wait a minute, what is this about? What is this about? I feel this because if we say God is all, then God is gay. And so that will be the
Hmm.
first one launched, and then after that, the floodgates open up, and we have many things. Also talking about the formation of extremist Christianity and its threat to our democracy, to leaving church and finding God, and what does that mean?
Mm,
And like I said, it just goes from there. So we'll be looking at you. You can find those announcements at pneumasoul.com.
hmm.
And I'm very excited to be able to turn, for the last couple of years, I've been teaching online through the blog and podcast and videos. And it's now time to get more structured. People want a place in a more private setting where they can ask questions and know that they're safe and it's not out in the public venue. So I'm very excited about that.
Great. Will you tell me the name? You mentioned the person's name. I don't want to say
Re-
their name wrong.
Reverend Arda,
Arden? Arda. I feel
Arda,
like I
Reverend
saw
Arda.
Reverend Arda come on here. So Reverend Arda or anyone else
Oh,
in your
good.
team, if you want to do a chat with me at any point in time and talk about the work you're doing that might help, please let me know. Reach
Oh,
out and we'll set something
yes.
up. It'd be great.
I will make sure you get in touch with her. She is amazing. But yeah, that's what we're doing, and we're very excited. Very busy, but very excited.
Good. Well, you're busy and it just means so much to me that you took the time to talk to us. I mean, it's been an hour and it feels like it's been 15 minutes, but I'm not surprised.
Of course, and thank you for reminding me that this was something we need to do, and we should do it. We should do it every so often. I enjoyed
Okay.
it.
It's a good little church, right? It's like a cyber church. We can make our own church. You can be outside the brick and mortar of a church building, y'all, as long as you are seen here, right? That's what we care about.
That's right. Amen.
Well, I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for your work. We will be in touch. I'm gonna ask you one more question, real
Sure.
quick. Tell me right now, off the bat, three things that you're grateful for right now.
My health. You don't take
Hmm.
that. You don't take that advantage. You don't take that for granted.
Yes.
My family, my
Hmm.
grandkids especially, and this ministry, and to be able to call it a ministry. I had a problem with that for a
Yeah.
long time, and
Yeah.
Rev Art and the team really helped me see that this is exactly what it is. It's a healing ministry, and those are my three things.
Thank you for
Keep me
reclaiming that. It
going.
gives us
Yeah,
strength as well. I love that.
reclaiming it. I love that.
Well,
Yes.
we'll be in touch. I love you. Have a wonderful
Love
rest
you
of your
too.
day. And everyone else, we love you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.